Part
You
two.
ready?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is, I know that everyone does have to be insured under the UIIA. And
Yes.
so I wanted to know when it comes to either asking them for their UIIA login, or is it best for me to just ask them, are you approved with all of the major ship lines?
Okay. Got you. So let me show you an example because let me show you an example because it's different ways to do it. Let me see if I can find this thing. So it's different ways to do it because I like when I have a carrier and I'm kind of realizing that we kind of want to work with each other. I like to send them an email. So I will
Okay.
send them an email and it will list like the things that I'm requiring of them. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so sometimes my list would have, let me see if I can find it. New dispatcher, that's not it. Sometimes my list bullet point, literally, hold on, because I can show you this part. So my list looks exactly like this slide that we went over right here. Share my screen. So I would say something like, I like to use ChatGPT a lot,
Yeah.
and I might have ChatGPT generate me an email, or I would like to say something like this. I'm gonna give you a true example of something that I sent to someone the other day. Actually, this was today. No, no, no. Where is it? Where's my new carrot? Here it is. So this is something that I found or had Chat GPT generate for me. Good morning.
Okay.
I'm writing to express my sincere gratitude for your interest in working with our Intermodal Freight Dispatching Company. We are thrilled to have you, blah, 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 blah. To proceed with this partnership, we kindly request that you provide us with the following documents. Now, I don't list UIIA because I know to ask them that once I get on the phone with them. Are you, approved with all the major ship lines? But starting off, I would like for this bullet list, and I'm gonna send you a recording of a copy of the video that we're doing tonight, so you can
Okay.
go back as references. But you want to have this kind of bullet point, this kind of like, welcome email, but make sure starting off, I would suggest for you guys to ask for the stuff that's on here. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Ask for that UIIA letter, ask for that SCAT letter. If they approve it, cool. If they don't, cool. It's okay. But at least you are asking for those things. And then sometimes I would run into carriers like, why do you need my UIIA letter? And then you would say, because I'm trying to make sure that you're approved with all the major ship lines. Do you know if you are approved with the major ship lines? And some major ship lines that you want to make sure that you're asking them about specifically, one of them is Maersk. Um,
Spell that.
Maersk is Maersk.
Okay.
Um, and that's actually the container that this guy has right here on his back.
Okay.
This is a Maersk container. Maersk
Mhm.
container requires certain things, like they require for a level one DOT inspection to be on their authority, which
Okay.
sometimes carriers have it and sometimes they don't. So you
Does DOT stand for Department of Transportation?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So you want to ask them about Maersk. You want to ask them about Evergreen,
Okay.
just regular Evergreen, like our street.
Okay.
You want to ask them maybe about Costco without the T, COSCO.
Okay.
You want to ask them, you could do like a Hapag Lloyd, HAPAG dash Lloyd. Pretty much everybody is approved with them. And then like an Ocean Network, you know, Ocean Network,
Okay.
whatever.
Ocean Network, two
Yeah.
words. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The two that I've seen that's like the most exclusive that ask for the most stuff is Maersk and Evergreen. And then you can kind
Okay.
of sprinkle the other ones in there.
Okay.
So, and it's okay if they aren't, because I recently went through a situation where I didn't do my due diligence and I didn't ask the company if they had Maersk, or I did and I kind of forgot. So this was the same carrier. I'm about to explain this. This was the same carrier that I had, and I had to go. He was one of the carriers where I was like, "You not approved for Evergreen. They got these containers coming in. I'm about to go to the notary. I'm printing this out. I'm going to the notary myself.
Okay.
I'm about to put my name on it and submit it to Evergreen or whatever." So I was able to get him approved with Evergreen. But with Maersk, I think I kind of forgot that he wasn't approved with Maersk. And one of my brokers, I was moving too fast. She had sent, we already was doing stuff with her, but the containers that she was sending us was with like OOCL, which is like Orient something. Write that one down too, OOCL.
Okay.
But so we were doing all of these with this specific OOCL ship line, and then in the middle of it, she had kind of snuck in a Maersk booking. So I had the driver go to the port, wasn't paying no attention. And it's in the email that she sent me. It's on the BOL and everything. I had the guy go to the port, and he was having issues trying to get it out, and we couldn't understand why. We thought it was something else until I realized it was a Maersk container. Kind of my fault. It's
Okay.
absolutely my fault. I can't say that it's kind of my fault. It's absolutely my fault because even though it's not the driver's responsibility, because he's not the carrier, the driver and the carrier are two different people. The driver doesn't know what the carrier's approval or denial is. You know what I mean? So that was my job. I could have not had my driver go to the port, wasting gas, wasting fuel. We don't call it gas in trucking. Wasting fuel, wasting time, being frustrated, and wasting the broker's time. She could have went to easily find another carrier that she knew was going to be approved from her. So you do, that was like within the past 30 days that I just went through this.
Okay.
So you just want to make sure that you know, if certain carriers are approved with them, cool. If they aren't approved with Maersk and Evergreen, you can still work with them. You just want to make sure when you get more into the details of the container, when you're asking for the ship line, you want to make sure that you're putting in the right containers with the right carriers that are approved with what's about to be ran.
Okay, so Maersk, Evergreen, Costco, all those are different ship lines.
Yes, they're different containers. Yep.
Okay. So label them as containers or as ship lines?
Ship lines.
Ship lines.
So ship lines. And the abbreviation is actually SSL, and SSL stands for steamship line.
Oh, okay. All right, good to know.
Yeah. Yep. I wouldn't say containers just because the container numbers always are changing.
Okay.
But yes, the steamship line, the SSL ship line.
Okay.
Yeah. That makes sense so far.
Yep, it's perfect. All right, so now we already been talking about the ship lines, what need to be required, seeing that they're insured.
Yes.
We're speaking to the carrier via email first, then we're also going to do some follow-up phone calls to get some more things tight before a deal is pretty much sealed.
Not necessarily through email first. Like most of the time, you're gonna hop on the phone with them, or you might talk to them like on Facebook or something like that. I ask for their email after I've already like, okay, what port are you coming out of? Once we kind of agreed that we're gonna work together, I send them the email so that they know the documents that I need after I've already kind of talked to them.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I guess that's good to know. How does the phone conversation go when you get to that? Are you going to get to that?
We're not getting into it today, girls.
Okay.
We're not gonna be able to get into it today, but we
Okay.
can. This is like when I was doing this live, this was an 8-week course.
Oh, it is long. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know if you were getting to the end. Okay, it's very long. Okay.
It was an 8-week course. That's why I'm trying to work on getting something where it's more self-paced so that people can go back to reference. But it was an 8-week course, and I was meeting with them 2 times a week, like
okay.
an hour and a
It is
half.
long.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of information. So yeah. But I think I got a YouTube video that has some live calls. I don't know exactly what we were doing, if we were calling carriers or if we were calling brokers. But we will get to that eventually.
Okay. Nope. I didn't know. I don't know the process. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. It's I try to teach as much as I can. It's not nothing I try to jam into y'all because it takes time to even process, all the information that you just learned. So, a notice of assignment. So, a factoring company, I probably should start with that. A factoring company kind of acts as a cash advance kind of place. So, typically, when you're working with brokers usually pay like a net 30 type of thing, right? So, their invoices and everything will get paid net 30 based most of the time. That's standard. Sometimes they have quick pay options, sometimes they don't. But standard wise, they're paying after 30 days. Carriers can't afford to pay or get paid 30 days later because they're coming out for fuel. They might be paying for drivers. They coming out with permits and overweight and chassis and all of these things. So a factoring company basically comes in as the middleman, and their fee is anywhere from like 2 to maybe 4%, 1 to 4%. And when your carrier has a factoring company, they'll get paid like within 24 to 48 hours, right? So a notice when a carrier, this is something separate, but what the carrier gets with a factoring company, they get set up, they give them their banking information, they give them all of this stuff, whatever all of that stuff is that they need. Because I've never had to get, I don't have an authority, so I've never had to get set up with a factoring company the way that a carrier would. But upon completion of getting set up with a factoring company, the factoring company provides the carrier with a document called notice of assignment.
Okay.
And on this document, you want to make sure that when you're getting your carrier set up with new brokers, that this is something that you have in your stash and your file, and all of the stuff, like all of the rest of the stuff that you have this because this will allow the broker to know, okay, we pay the factoring company within those 30 days. Make sense?
Yep. It's a good
Okay.
document to have on file when they have it. Yep. Okay.
Yes. So now, aside for that, sometimes some carriers want you to factor their loads for them, which is fine. I feel like that comes at a bigger fee. Um,
Where you basically make a bigger fee.
it just kind of depends. It depends on how you have your stuff set up because right now, I don't, and probably for the past 2 years, I don't really factor. Some carriers like to do factoring themselves because it's their banking information, is whatever, it's
Right.
all of their stuff. But sometimes I have to go in and make sure that I'm factoring because we might have a large project. And the way I use my TMS system, I want to make sure that everything is getting paid so that I can get paid for everything. But some carriers want you to factor for them. Some carriers might not want you to factor for them. But either way, a notice of assignment is something that you want to have on file. I don't want to get too, because I can break all of these things could be like a course within itself. And
I
I
got you.
don't get too deep into this. So we just gonna keep it kind of surface.
Okay.
Notice of assignment. Make sure you keep that on your files.
I got you.
And then their COI. So typically, their auto liability, most carriers, like 90% of carriers, have their liability at $1 million, and then their cargo is at $250,000 at 250,000. That's kind of like standard for UIIA stuff. I've run into situations where cargo for carriers is set at like 100,000, and that doesn't meet the broker's requirements. So they had to go and ask for an increase and stuff like that. But generally, 98% of the time, I've not run into any issues where people are having like certificate of insurance, approval raised or anything like that. But these are the numbers that you kind of want to look out for. $1 million on auto liability, 250 on cargo. You're gonna get approved for most of the stuff.
Do we need any insurance personally? Like business insurance? Okay.
I mean, nope.
Yeah. Okay.
I've never had business insurance with none of my businesses. Well, I have with preservation, but no, not with this. Not at all.
Not with this one. Okay.
And I think it's just because we digital. Like we don't have to be anywhere.
Okay.
And then this is a hazmat certification example. So, like I said, hazmat endorsements, sometimes they're on their CDL, and sometimes they have like a document like this, where it'll tell you exactly which class they'll do or which class that they're willing to do. Some hazardous material classes are more dangerous than others. Like for example, right now I have this hazmat container coming out of New York, New Jersey, going to Akron, Ohio. It's a 4.2 hazmat class, whatever that means. When I looked it up, it said that it's combustive, like it could catch on fire or something like that. And I can't give that to a carrier or a driver who doesn't have hazmat endorsement. Like when you're doing hazmat containers, they have to have a hazmat endorsement just in case anything happens. But what's cool about hazmat is it pays more, obviously. So, you handle dangerous goods, they'll pay a little bit more. So, like for example, one of my broker, she was like, "Yeah, can you do this container from New York, New Jersey to Akron, Ohio for $2,500?" And I was like, "Okay." And then I did the math, and I was like, "Can I get it for 3 grand?" And she was like, "Well, I'll come close at 2,800, right?" Long story short, she ended up giving it to us for $3,000, which makes me feel like, how much is you really making off of this, girl?
Right. It probably was worth more like 4,500 or something. So you negotiate over the phone usually or via email?
I do. Well, that broker in particular, we do via email communication a lot. Yeah.
Okay. All
I
right.
was like, I need to be figuring out how to be a broker because, ma'am, she came off that extra little 200 without me asking. So anyway, that's just a good example of, when you have hazmat, it's kind of like you have the ability to negotiate gently, not too aggressive, because, you're not the only person who has hazmat, but you can use that to your benefit to ask for more money because it's going this far, it's this kind of class and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I like dealing with people.
How does everyone pretty much get paid then, as far as like the carrier, the person that's sending the package, them using us to make sure, it's getting where it's going, whoever's driving it to the port? How does all of that work? Is that a part of this or that's another full thing?
No, we can talk about it. So
Okay.
we're just gonna use an example, right? So let's say the shipper is Walmart.
Okay.
Let's say that the shipper is Walmart, and I'm gonna just use containers. So the shipper is Walmart, which is shipper slash customer. It's the same thing, right? So we got the shipper. The shipper is the one that got the funds, they got the money, they got the merchandise. They try to move from Detroit to Cleveland because we got rails here. We don't have the ports, but we have rails. Kind of the same thing, but it's a little different. So let's say that it's going from Detroit to Cleveland in a container and coming back to Detroit. So Walmart is like, "Hey, logistics company, a broker, whatever. I have a container that I need to move from Detroit to Cleveland. Can you quote me on this?" And they'll say, "Yeah, we can do this for $5,000. They're like, "Okay, bet we'll let you do this for $5,000. So then the broker goes to try to find either a dispatcher or a carrier that has the ability to move this freight. So they find a carrier or a dispatcher or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, can you move this freight for me? Can you quote it and tell me how much you want it to be moved for?" So the carrier is like, "Yeah, I'll move that for $3,000. Okay, cool. You can move it for me for $3,000. The broker and the carrier or the broker and the dispatcher, they get set up, get all the paperwork. You got your NOA, you got all of the documents, the COI, and all of the stuff, the W-9, all the stuff that we need on file, the broker also needs on file. That's kind of what we needed. So they got them all set up. The carrier or the driver runs the load from Detroit to Cleveland, gets it unloaded, brings the empty container back to Detroit, got all the documents that they need, and they submit it to their factoring company. That's when people start getting paid out. So once
Okay.
the load is complete, then
Okay.
the carrier or the driver or the dispatcher, whoever is in charge of the accounting part of it, they're going to submit it to their factoring company. They're going to provide them with a proof of delivery, the rate confirmation, the BOL, the tickets, all of the stuff that they need. Let's say if it was an overweight, whatever, they're going to provide them with all of the documentation to the factoring company. So
Okay.
within 24 to 48 hours, the carrier gets that $3,000.
Okay.
Okay. The driver is gonna get whatever the carrier say that they gonna get. So let's say that he paid them 2 grand. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a driver. That's like, on that's kind of down the line of what we talk about. We
Gotcha.
get, let's say, 10% of that. We get
Okay.
$300. That's on that side. On the other side, the factoring company is going to send an invoice to the broker saying, hey, we um we are willing to wait 30 days to get paid for this $3,000 that our carrier ran the load for you for. The factoring company gets paid within 30 days, right?
Mhm.
The broker gets paid from the shipper upon completion as well. So I don't know how quickly the shipper gets paid or the broker
The broker gets
paid
paid. Okay.
from the shipper. But
Gotcha.
what I do know is that whatever the difference was, for our example, it was a $2,000 difference. They're
Mhm.
paying the broker the $5,000. The broker is paying the factoring company that $3,000, and then they're keeping that $2,000 difference.
Uh,
I would love for this to be a real example. I don't know what the margins,
no, I
but
think that
that
was a
makes
great example. Basically, the dispatch funds, I was just trying to see where the dispatch funds comes from. So it would be from that factoring company pretty much.
nope. So you typically get paid from the carrier, which is why it's important to have your carrier dispatcher agreement
Oh, okay.
laid out. So,
Okay.
for example, I typically, which I think I'm gonna change it a little bit, I typically invoice on Fridays. So if I had, 5 loads from my carrier this week, I'm going to invoice at the end of the week, and then you need to pay me by Monday. If you don't pay me by Wednesday, it's late. And then
Okay.
if you don't pay me within 7 days of that late Wednesday, I'm pulling it out of your account. Um,
Okay.
so we have to rely on the carrier to pay us. We don't
Oh,
get paid up
okay.
front. Nothing comes to our account first. We aren't the ones that's paying the carrier. The carrier
Mhm.
is paying us after they get paid from their factoring company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So not even the broker is paying.
No,
Okay.
mm-mm,
Gotcha. Okay.
no, no. So we work for the carrier. That's what's
Okay.
paying us. But you gotta tread lightly because you also work for the broker. You know what I mean? Like you also have a relationship established for
That's what I'm saying.
broker.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. That's like a little fine line
It is
between
a fine
the
line.
carrier, the broker, and you. Okay.
Yeah, it's a
Gotcha.
fine
Okay.
line because I like, for example, I have a broker that I've worked with for years, and she's seen me go through different carriers, and she still comes to me and say, "Hey, as you got some carriers out of this port and this port and this port," and I would send them that. So, yeah, I work for my carrier because my carrier pays me, but I also know my relationship with this person enough to know what she's willing to go for, what she's not willing to go for, like how to keep I gotta keep relationships with both of y'all.
Yeah.
Like not about the like
I
I've
got
had some carriers be like, you need to tell like who? I'm not about to talk to her crazy. Like this
you.
lady she keeps the loads coming and
Okay.
brokers come and go, carriers come and go. But when you do have good relationship with either or, like you really want to keep it like, keep good relationships with them. But our
Okay.
paycheck comes from carriers, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. Any more questions?
That's all so far.
I don't even know. I need to write that down.
Really, really good. Lots of information. It's a lot. Mhm.
So I don't even know if I go over that. How do we get paid part? But it's a whole process to that because I use QuickBooks and
I have that already too, so
yeah,
that's good.
I love QuickBooks, girl.
Hmm.
QuickBooks, I love them. Okay, so this is basically the point where you followed your carrier on Facebook, you spoke to them, you sent them your little email, they sent them not the little email, the big email.
Hmm.
Send them your email, and then they send back the documents that you need. It's like, okay, now what? I got my first carrier. Now what do I need to do? Um, so the first thing that I would recommend is for you guys to organize all of your carrier documents in a secure place. I used to show how to go into Google Drive. Like I did an in-depth training on how to put your carrier files in Google Drive. We just don't have time to do that today.
Oh yeah, I know
And
how, but
then,
good.
are you familiar with Google Drive?
Very much, yes.
Okay, good. Girl, when I learned that, I had this it was this Indian guy who showed me how to do it. And I was just amazed, like, oh my gosh, and it's free. Like, I love Google Drive. I love Google Drive. So that's a good option, or however people store it. I think Google Drive is good just because it's web-based, it's cloud-based. And then you can also do the TMS system that I use called Easy Loads. But that's a paid system. So starting off with Google Drive is absolutely fine.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to get into chassis and containers and what they look like and all that good stuff. So what's the chassis? You ready?
Yep.
Okay. So a chassis is a specialized trailer or undercarriage designed to transport shipping containers over the road. It is essentially the frame and the wheels on which a container is mounted for transport. So this is literally what it looks like. And then they come in different sizes and types to accommodate different container sizes, weights, and they're typically provided by leasing companies or intermodal equipment providers. You have any? We're gonna get more into that. Hold on, let me just
Okay.
give you questions for a 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
So the chassis sizes can vary depending on the intended use and in the location. In our country, the most common chassis sizes are 20 foot, 40 foot, and 45 foot. What's really cool is that they have some that's like a combo that goes from a 40 and then or that goes from a 20 and they can extend it for a 40. So at any point, they can also always get like one of those size containers. And then there are some less common sizes, such as a 53-foot chassis. I haven't ran into that yet, but those are used for specific types of cargo.
Okay.
Go to the next one. So how do carriers get a chassis? Sometimes a carrier could lease a chassis from a leasing company. They'll provide them with like a chassis in exchange for like a monthly payment, just like a car note. You could buy it from a chassis pool or rent it. I shouldn't say buy. It's like renting from a chassis pool. And this is what most of my carriers do. So some of the ports have a chassis pool where you can rent or buy a chassis. This is a shared pool of chassis that can be rented by trucking companies or owner operators. So what happens is like, for example, in Virginia, the I'll be like, hey, Marcus, I got a 20-foot container that needs to go to Greensboro, North Carolina. He's like, okay, what size is the container? I tell him it's a 40-foot. He can go use his SCAT code, right?
Okay.
Use
I
his
got
SCAT code and that UIIA.
the insurance. Okay.
This covers for them. You have to have UIIA for containers and for these chassis. Like they're not
Okay.
letting anybody just get a chassis.
Okay.
So they could go into the port, provide them with their SCAT code. If they're approved with the chassis pool, then go get whatever containers are available. I mean, the chassis that are available, and then continue over to the port to actually pull the container from the port itself.
Okay. So the drivers are also are having a scat in the UIIA.
Nope. So the drivers use the carriers.
Oh, okay. They use the carriers. Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Mhm.
So yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. Mhm.
And then you could buy from a supplier. Some people just buy them straight out, like they'll buy their own. They have the, expenses to buy their own, or you could buy from like a private seller. You'll hop on Facebook and Craigslist and see people selling their own chassis. So that's how
Okay.
people gain access to chassis. The most common one for me so far has been people having them access to it through the chassis pool.
Okay.
So these are just some examples of chassis pool companies that carriers can get chassis from. Because I've run into situations where like a carrier isn't completely set up out of the port, and I don't like to spend too much time on teaching you guys how to convert somebody into the port. We kind of want to deal with people that are already operating in the port, but later, if you did run into someone who needed the help, it's kind of like a consulting type of thing. And the more that you learn, the more that you'll be able to give them the knowledge and the information, at least point them in the right direction of what they need to do to get set up with the port, to get set up with the chassis pool. So these are just some examples of leasing companies and chassis pool. Track Intermodal, that's like nationwide. DCLI, FlexiVan, and HRCP. Now, some of them, like HRCP, is Virginia specifically, right?
Okay.
Track Intermodal is a little bit all over the place. Some of them are specific to certain ports, like HRCP, Hampton Roads Chassis Pool. That's a Virginia thing.
Like Hampton, Virginia.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
DCLI is, I want to say they have stuff like in Houston or something like that. And then it's others that are like Track Intermodal. I know that they have locations in New York, New Jersey, and different locations in our nation. And then FlexiVan, I've heard of them in like Florida and stuff like that. So once you get like comfortable with the port, because you're going to start off with working with one port. Like you kind of want to familiarize yourself with one port. I've noticed, to me, it was the best thing to do for my career, my business, because I don't want to be the one that's like, yeah, containers all over the place, all over the USA. Whatever you have a container, call me when I'm marketing myself, because I'm not going to think about you if I got something in Maine. You know what I mean? If I got something in Georgia, like I was drilling into brokers and with my carriers, like I have freight in Virginia. Call me if you got anything out of Virginia. Virginia, Virginia. Like I started and stayed in Virginia, and I just started going to like New York, New Jersey, and different places just because, I feel comfortable enough to do so now. But just as a tip, I think that is smart to kind of stay in one place so that they always are thinking about you when they have a container coming to Virginia, they sending it right over to my email. Now it's like, oh, I have carriers in New York, New Jersey as well, but I'm not saturating them with all over the place. Like you can't be all over the place.
Right. Unless you have a whole call center.
You can't be all over the place. You should specialize in one place first, and then get used to other places. Because yeah, that's my spiel. I'm actually gonna stop here. So I'm gonna put this video on.
Okay.
I'm on pause, and I think this video is like 5 minutes long. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear it?
Welcome to another edition of the Drayage.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Drayage update in partnership with Next. I'm Emily Zink, joined.
Oh, I can't hear it anymore.
Major part of drayage is so important. Why are these so important to the process?
It's what enabled containers, to move from the ports, terminals to the doors, whether that be a receiver, a warehouse. It provides the over-the-road transportation. So essentially, without a chassis, the containers can't be delivered.
They're so important. They need to get delivered, but sometimes there's a shortage. Talk about that.
Yeah, an issue recently has been the amount of time that shippers, BCOs, are keeping the containers and chassis at their docks. So when a container delivers to a DC, it's on the chassis. It's got to be dock highs, just as if it were a 53-foot drive-in, backed up all the way to the doors. And a lot of times the contracts that they negotiate with the ocean carriers can include what they know is what's known as 14 free days at destinations. So they have those containers sometimes 14 days before they're fully unloaded and travel back to the port. So that entire time, that chassis is also being kept out that long. So if you have enough shippers, enough BCOs keeping enough of these containers and chassis outside the port, outside the terminal, they can't be used for another load.
And some ports are getting pretty creative. I know you said the Port of Charleston, is now doing chassis offsite.
Yeah, so I think everyone's looking at how can we do this more efficiently. About 10 years ago, the chassis, which were largely owned by ocean carriers, they basically said, okay, we're going to divest, we're going to allow independent chassis providers to now, own a majority of the chassis and manage this. It's almost a separate process. Well, ports like the Port of Charleston, Port of Virginia, really every port's looking at how can we do this more efficiently. And Charleston said, we're going to move these offsite and create really a pool of chassis that a number of different private owners can be involved in, kind of like a co-op, a gray pool as they're sometimes known, just to make that more efficient because basically you're able to pick up chassis, get containers from different ocean carriers, return the chassis to those locations. So it just makes it more efficient. You don't have what's known as, a chassis split fee or anything like that.
We talked about some issues with chassis and also another creative way to kind of manage this process. What are some other things that forwarders and shippers are doing?
Well, in my opinion, if it's all about the chassis, because without chassis, you're not able to deliver the containers. I think doing things like tracking the chassis directly makes a lot of sense. If you look at someone like American Intermodal Management, they're actually, that's their approach. So they're building brand new chassis so they know that they're up to date. They know that they're, not 17, 18 years old, going down the road with potential problems. And they're GPS tracking them. So they're enabling BCOs, freight forwarders, and BOCCs to have greater visibility. By tracking those chassis, you're in turn tracking those containers. So if the containers are tracked on the vessels coming in, they have a good idea of what's happening, what time they arrive, then they have greater visibility on that door delivery portion, which is oftentimes one of the most important pieces.
Why do you think it's taken so long for something like GPS tracking to happen, and why more companies aren't doing it?
I think there's a few things. Number one, I think just the drayage industry overall, from a tracking standpoint, often gets overlooked. Like I say, if you have to have a chassis to deliver a container, I think it's one of the things that makes the most sense. I've really always thought that because if you're tracking that chassis, that's always there at the terminal. It's only moving regionally so far. You just have so much better visibility. And like I say, if you know that it's at a receiver's door, then it's got a container on there and what time it returns. So in terms of bringing greater visibility to that process and, the fees that are incurred sometimes bringing greater visibility and accountability between those parties involved, I think is super important. But another thing I would mention is just there's so many different players involved. Now that the ocean carriers are largely out of the chassis game, you have a lot of these independent providers who, they're competitive. So, in that competition, it's hard for them to really share resources, share data. And it's just taken a while. But I think, with people like American Intermodal Management, they're kind of leading the way. And I think if they can really prove out that it makes a lot of sense, they can prove that it adds a lot of value to the end user, I think you'll see a lot of people follow suit.
As always, Henry Byers, extremely insightful. If you want to look for more drayage updates in partnership with Next, just head to freightwaves.com.
That's a really good video.
I love that video.
Bringing to you a word.
No, excellent.